For nearly 20 years, the world was told the full client list didn't exist. They told us the tapes were lost, the files were protected by national security, and the names of the world's most powerful men would stay buried forever. But last week, the silence finally broke. Under the 2026 Epstein Files Transparency Act, the Department of Justice just dumped over 3 million pages of raw evidence. We're talking about the private emails, the secret surveillance logs, and the unredacted flight manifests of the Lolita Express. In this video, we aren't hiding behind initials. We are going to name every name found in the 2026 archives, from Prince Andrew and Bill Clinton to the tech titans and the fixers who kept the machine running. We're covering the full story, from the math teacher who built a multi-billion-dollar blackmail empire to the suspicious final minutes in a Manhattan jail cell and the millions of documents the government tried to keep secret until today. This is the full story of the Epstein Files. No more redactions, no more lies. In the early 1970s, Jeffrey Epstein was a man who simply did not exist in the world of high finance. He was a Brooklyn-born college dropout with no degree and no pedigree. Yet in September 1974, he walked into the elite Dalton School on Manhattan's Upper East Side as a physics and mathematics teacher. The 2026 unsealed files reveal that his hiring was one of the most statistically improbable events in the school's history. He was hired by headmaster Donald Barr. In a detail that has haunted investigators for years, Donald Barr, the father of future Attorney General William Barr, had published a science fiction novel called Space Relations just 1 year earlier. The book's plot revolved around an intergalactic slave trade involving children. Epstein lacked the credentials to teach at such a level, but he possessed a different kind of currency, social manipulation. While he was eventually dismissed from Dalton in 1976 for poor performance and inappropriate conduct, he had already achieved his goal. He had spent 2 years networking with the parents of the world's most powerful children. One of those parents was Alan Ace Greenberg, the legendary CEO of Bear Stearns. Greenberg was so taken by Epstein's raw mathematical intelligence that he bypassed every standard hiring protocol in Wall Street history. He brought Epstein into the firm as a junior assistant to a floor trader. By 1980, Epstein had climbed the ranks to become a limited partner at Bear Stearns. However, internal compliance memos released in the 2026 data dump show that his exit in 1981 was far from voluntary. He was caught in a series of unauthorized tax shielding maneuvers that threatened the firm's standing. Instead of being prosecuted, he was allowed to walk away with his reputation intact, a pattern of protection that would define his entire life. Following his exit from Bear Stearns, Epstein entered his most mysterious phase. He rebranded himself as a financial bounty hunter. He claimed to work exclusively for billionaires, charging massive fees to recover stolen assets and hidden offshore accounts. The 2026 DOJ files, however, show that during this period, Epstein had almost no legitimate paper trail of successful trades or investments. Then came the meeting that changed history. In the late 1980s, Epstein was introduced to Leslie Wexner, the billionaire founder of L Brands, the architect behind Victoria's Secret, Bath & Body Works, and Abercrombie & Fitch. Wexner was a titan of industry, but he was also a man who valued extreme privacy. What happened next remains the greatest financial mystery of the 20th century. In 1991, Wexner signed a document that investigators in 2026 call the foundational glitch. He granted Jeffrey Epstein full power of attorney over his multi-billion-dollar estate. This gave a man with a documented history of ethical violations at Bear Stearns the legal right to sign Wexner's personal checks, buy and sell his homes, and manage his private trusts. The 2026 unsealed ledgers show a massive, inexplicable transfer of assets from Wexner's holding companies into Epstein's private accounts. This included the transfer of the 21,000 square foot Manhattan mansion, the largest private home in New York, which Wexner originally bought for $13 million. Wexner essentially gifted the property to Epstein for $0. But the money was just the fuel. The 2026 files contain new testimony from former L Brands executives who state that Epstein used Wexner's prestige to infiltrate the modeling world. He began posing as a talent scout for Victoria's Secret, using the most famous brand in women's fashion as bait to lure young women into his properties. Forensic accountants in the 2026 probe have concluded that Epstein's wealth was never based on market success. It was a fabricated fortune derived almost entirely from a single benefactor. Wexner provided the money, the houses, and the planes, but more importantly, he provided the credibility. This partnership allowed a disgraced math teacher to walk into the boardrooms of the global elite not as a fraud, but as a billionaire. The system was now officially online. Epstein had the wealth, he had the benefactor, and he had the cover of the world's most famous fashion brands. He was no longer just a man, he was an institution, protected by a wall of billions that would take the world 30 years to tear down. By the mid-1990s, Jeffrey Epstein had moved beyond simple wealth. He was now building a sovereign kingdom designed for a single purpose: the absolute isolation of his victims and the absolute leverage over his guests. The 2026 unsealed files from the Department of Justice refer to this as the geography of control. This wasn't just luxury real estate, it was a global, purpose-built machine for trafficking and blackmail, spanning 4 key locations that operated outside the normal reach of the law. The nerve center was the Manhattan townhouse on East 71st Street. At 21,000 square feet, it was the largest private residence in New York City. But the 2026 blueprints reveal it was also a high-tech panopticon. Investigators found evidence of what staff called the Black Room, a central server hub that managed a massive hidden surveillance network. The 2026 files confirmed that every bedroom and bathroom in the mansion was wired with pinhole cameras. This gave Epstein a dead man's switch. By recording the world's most powerful men in compromising positions, he ensured that if he ever went down, he would take the global elite with him. The cameras weren't for security, they were for insurance. In Palm Beach, Florida, Epstein operated out of a waterfront mansion on El Brio Way. This was the recruitment hub. The 2026 files include detailed logs from the local police department that were suppressed for years. These logs show that the Florida estate functioned like a revolving door for local high school students. The geography of the cul-de-sac and the high perimeter walls allowed Epstein to move people in and out of the property in broad daylight without neighbors ever seeing a face. But the most notorious location was Little St. James, the 72-acre private island in the U.S. Virgin Islands. To the world, it was a billionaire's paradise. To the victims, it was an inescapable prison. The 2026 unsealed documents finally provide the high-resolution photos of the temple on the hill. For years, people theorized about what was inside. The 2026 blueprints prove the building was a hollow facade designed to hide a subterranean staircase. This staircase led to a reinforced lower level that connected to a secret utility hatch in the main residence. This allowed Epstein to move cargo and guests from the private dock to the interior of the compound through an underground tunnel, completely bypassing the eyes of the general staff. Finally, there was the Zorro Ranch in Stanley, New Mexico. Spanning nearly 8,000 acres, this was a site of total psychological isolation. If you were brought here, there was nowhere to run but miles of barren desert. The 2026 files contain internal emails where Epstein discussed the ranch not as a home, but as a biolab. He was obsessed with transhumanism and eugenics, the idea of seeding the human race with his own DNA. The ranch featured a private airstrip and a 26,000-square-foot hangar large enough to house a Boeing 727. This allowed for completely private international flights that never had to clear customs at a public airport. The 2026 unsealed records prove that these properties were never just homes, they were a tactical network. The tunnels, the black room servers, and the private airstrips were the physical walls that kept the truth buried for 3 decades.
In charge of the prosecution was Alexander Acosta, the U.S. Attorney for Florida. The 2026 files finally confirm what was long suspected. Acosta didn't just sign a deal, he signed a total surrender. On September 24, 2007, a secret non-prosecution agreement, or NPA, was finalized. The terms were so lopsided they were almost illegal. The 2026 records prove that the DOJ intentionally hid the deal from the victims for nearly a year. Under the Crime Victims' Rights Act, prosecutors must tell victims about a plea deal. But the 2026 unsealed memos show Acosta's team actively lied to the victims' lawyers, telling them the investigation was ongoing while the papers were already signed and locked in a safe. The deal allowed Epstein to plead guilty to just 2 state-level prostitution charges. Federal sex trafficking charges, which could have sent him away forever, simply vanished. But the most chilling part of the 2026 release is the immunity clause. Acosta didn't just protect Epstein. The agreement granted absolute immunity to any potential co-conspirators. This gave a lifetime get-out-of-jail-free card to Ghislaine Maxwell and the 4 other women named in the 2026 logs as recruiters. Then came the sentence. Epstein was given 18 months, but served only 13. And the 2026 Palm Beach County jail logs show that his time behind bars was a fiction. He was granted work release for 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. Every morning, a private chauffeur picked Epstein up from jail and drove him to his own office in West Palm Beach. The 2026 testimony from former guards reveals he wasn't doing work, he was holding meetings, making millions, and reportedly still seeing young women. The 2026 files include a newly released FBI memo from 2008, where an agent wrote, "We have essentially provided a predator with a government-sanctioned office to continue his operations." This deal didn't just let Epstein off the hook, it emboldened him. For the next decade, he used the 2008 agreement to tell the world he was vetted and cleared by the U.S. government. The 2026 Transparency Act proves that the sweetheart deal was the ultimate failure of the American justice system. It wasn't an accident or a mistake. It was a calculated decision to protect the powerful at the expense of the innocent. It took 18 years for the full details of this betrayal to be unsealed. Now that they are, the names of the prosecutors and lawyers who signed that paper are forever etched into the darkest chapter of legal history. The flight logs of Epstein's Lolita Express were the most guarded documents on Earth. But the 2026 unsealed files have finally turned the plane into a mobile crime scene. The 3.5 million pages released this year prove that the aircraft was not just a luxury jet, it was a vetting ground for the elite. Every flight was a transaction. According to the 2026 data, the logs confirmed that Prince Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, appears in the records and private correspondence hundreds of times. The 2026 dump includes never-before-seen photos of the former prince on all fours, leaning over an unidentified woman on the floor of an undisclosed property. These images, combined with unsealed emails where Epstein offered to introduce Andrew to a 26-year-old Russian woman, were the final nails in the coffin for his reputation. By early 2026, the British monarchy was forced to permanently exile him from all royal life. Then there is the record of Bill Clinton. While he has long denied visiting the island, the 2026 manifests and internal FBI logs place him on the aircraft for multiple international trips including a 2002 tour of Africa with actors Kevin Spacey and Chris Tucker. The 2026 unsealed documents contain a bombshell: draft emails from Epstein claiming Clinton likes them young. While Clinton's team maintains he had no knowledge of the crimes, the 2026 release includes photographs of Clinton at social gatherings inside Epstein's homes that were previously scrubbed from the public record. The logs also document Donald Trump. The 2026 release contains over 1,000 references to Trump, including a compiled list of tips sent to the FBI's National Threat Operations Center. These files detail impromptu stops at Trump's Atlantic City casinos and flights where Trump and Epstein were the only two passengers. The 2026 files include a friendly email sent to Ghislaine Maxwell signed "Love from Melania." While Trump claimed to have fallen out with Epstein in 2004, the 2026 documents show Epstein's staff were still tracking his social circle and discussing his preferences well into the mid-2000s. But the most disturbing new evidence in the 2026 Epstein library involves the titans of the tech world. The files reveal a predatory chain of correspondence with Bill Gates. Draft emails from Epstein allege that Gates had engaged in extramarital affairs and contracted a sexually transmitted disease from Russian girls provided by the network. Investigators believe Epstein was using this information as a blackmail tool to force Gates into funding a multi-billion-dollar charitable foundation.
For the first time, the 2026 files also expose the full extent of Elon Musk's interactions. While Musk has publicly claimed he refused invitations, the unsealed 2026 emails show a much more casual dialogue. In November 2012, Epstein emailed Musk asking, "How many people will you be for the heli to Island?" Musk reportedly replied, "Probably just Tallulah and me," before asking, "What day/night will be the wildest party on your island?" The 2026 logs further identify a who's who of the global establishment. Richard Branson, who reportedly invited Epstein to his own private island. Howard Lutnick, the current Commerce Secretary, who made plans to lunch on Epstein's island. And Steve Tisch, the co-owner of the New York Giants, who Epstein reportedly connected with various women. The 2026 flight logs prove that the Lolita Express was a trap. Every person who stepped onto that plane became a data point in Epstein's blackmail servers. The 2026 documents show that the world's most powerful people weren't just passengers. They were part of an ecosystem where the normal rules of law simply did not apply, and the logs are the ultimate proof that the elite were never more than a flight away from the darkness. By July 2019, the world was watching as the ultimate untouchable was finally behind bars. Jeffrey Epstein was being held at the Metropolitan Correctional Center, MCC, in Manhattan, a facility known for housing terrorists and drug lords. He was the highest-profile prisoner in American history. Yet, on the morning of August 10, 2019, he was found dead in his cell. The world was told it was a suicide by hanging, but the 2026 unsealed files from the Department of Justice have turned that open and shut case into a forensic nightmare. Under the 2026 Transparency Act, the public finally has access to the lost logs, the internal communications that describe the chaotic and perhaps calculated environment of the jail. The 2026 data dump includes over 400 hours of surveillance footage from the MCC's Special Housing Unit. For years, the FBI claimed that the two cameras directly facing Epstein had malfunctioned and failed to record. However, the 2026 release includes raw footage from a camera previously described as non-recording that provides a direct view of the stairs leading to Epstein's tier. This 2026 footage reveals a staggering breach of reality. The logs confirm that the two guards assigned to watch him, Michael Thomas and Tova Noel, sat just 15 feet from his door. But instead of checking on him every 30 minutes as required by law, the 2026 digital forensic reports prove they spent the night shopping for motorcycles and furniture online. For nearly 3 hours, the cameras show both guards appear to be fast asleep at their desks. During this exact window, the 2026 unsealed video contains a missing minute, a jump in the time code from 11:59 p.m. to 12 a.m. While the DOJ previously called this a technical glitch, the 2026 files include internal emails where IT contractors admitted the gap was unexplained and potentially manual. The autopsy findings are even more explosive in the 2026 archives. We now have the unredacted notes from the private pathologist, Dr. Michael Baden, who observed the procedure. He focuses on the fractures of the hyoid bone in Epstein's neck. While the official ruling called it a suicide, Baden's notes in the 2026 files point out that such a break is found in only 2% of suicidal hangings, but is present in nearly 90% of manual strangulations. Furthermore, the 2026 files reveal a chain of command failure. Just 24 hours before his death, Epstein's cellmate, a former police officer accused of quadruple murder, was transferred out of the cell. This left Epstein alone in direct violation of the jail's own safety protocols following a previous suicide attempt on July 23rd. Chillingly, the 2026 release includes the last letter, a handwritten note Epstein tried to mail days before he died. It was addressed to a legal contact and mentioned names that will not allow me to reach trial. This letter was seized by the FBI and remained classified until the 2026 Transparency Act forced its release. The 2026 unsealed files also include interviews with other inmates on the tier. One witness, whose testimony was suppressed for 7 years, claimed he heard shuffling and a dull thud during the night, but was told by guards to keep his mouth shut or lose his commissary. Point 5 proves that the mystery of Epstein's death wasn't just a series of coincidences. Whether he took his own life or was silenced, the 2026 documents prove the system didn't just fail, it dismantled itself. The broken cameras, the sleeping guards, the transferred cellmate, and the missing footage were the final tools used to ensure that Jeffrey Epstein would never have to speak in a court of law.
On January 30, 2026, the world witnessed the single largest declassification of criminal evidence in American history. Under the legal mandate of the Epstein Files Transparency Act, the Department of Justice unsealed over 3.5 million pages of raw evidence, including 180,000 images and 2,000 videos. This was the moment the blackmail ledger finally became public property. The 2026 Epstein Library has fundamentally changed our understanding of the network. It's no longer about a client list, it's about a global system of influence. The files prove that Epstein wasn't just a financier, he was a high-level information broker who kept detailed, unredacted dossiers on his guests' private lives to ensure his own survival. The most explosive revelation in the 2026 data concerns Peter Mandelson, the former UK business secretary. The unsealed documents show that Mandelson, a titan of the British Labour Party, was allegedly leaking market-sensitive government information to Epstein during the 2008 financial crisis. The 2026 logs include bank statements showing 3 payments totaling $75,000 from Epstein to accounts linked to Mandelson or his partner. Most damningly, emails from May 2010 show Mandelson messaging Epstein about a €500 billion bailout package hours before it was officially announced. By February 3, 2026, London's Metropolitan Police launched a full criminal investigation into Mandelson for misconduct in public office, a charge that carries a maximum sentence of life in prison. The 2026 library also exposed the deep involvement of Steve Tisch, the co-owner of the New York Giants. Mentioned over 400 times in the new files, Tisch is seen in 2013 email chains asking Epstein if specific women were pro or civilian.
In one exchange, Epstein offered to connect Tish with a woman from Ukraine, praising her beauty in crude terms. Tish replied within a minute, asking, "Is she fun?" While Tish has publicly expressed regret, the 2026 documents show a transactional relationship that went far beyond philanthropy. As of February 2026, the NFL has confirmed it is reviewing these files under its personal conduct policy. The tech world was not spared. The 2026 files contain unverified but disturbing draft emails from Epstein regarding Bill Gates. These documents allege that Gates had engaged in extramarital affairs and even contracted a sexually transmitted disease from Russian girls provided by Epstein. The 2026 archives suggest Epstein was using this information to pressure Gates into participating in a multi-billion-dollar charitable fund. Gates has denied all allegations, but the files paint a picture of a man being systematically hunted by a blackmail artist. Then there is the case of Howard Lutnick, the current U.S. Commerce Secretary. For years, Lutnick claimed he had cut ties with Epstein decades ago, but the 2026 unsealed manifests prove that in December 2012, Lutnick and his wife accepted an invitation to Little St. James, coordinating their arrival by private yacht with their children. The emails show Lutnick's wife, Allison, asking Epstein's assistant for the exact coordinates of the island so their boat, Excellence, could dock. This 2026 revelation has led to immediate calls for Lutnick's resignation, as it proves a continued association long after Epstein's first conviction. The 2026 files even reached into the heart of Indian politics. They expose links between Epstein and billionaire Anil Ambani. According to messages from March 2017, Ambani sought Epstein's help to facilitate meetings with Jared Kushner and Steve Bannon ahead of Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to the U.S. The 2026 documents show Epstein bragging to Bannon that he had met Modi's guy, claiming that the Indian leadership wanted his assistance in navigating the Trump administration. While India has dismissed these as trashy ruminations, the sheer volume of the 2026 data confirms Epstein's reach was truly global. The most chilling aspect of the 2026 data dump is the shadow list. Despite the 3.5 million pages released, investigators like Ro Khanna and Thomas Massey have pointed out that millions more remain withheld. The 2026 files show that while we now have the names of Mandelson, Tish, and Lutnick, the government is still fiercely protecting a second layer of co-conspirators. Point 6 proves that the 2026 Transparency Act was not a final victory, but a first strike. The names are no longer theories, they are entries in a ledger of power. For the first time, the receipts are public, the emails are unredacted, and the world is seeing the full, terrifying scope of the web Jeffrey Epstein spun around the leaders of the modern world. We have spent this video naming the billionaires, the politicians, and the fixers. But the only reason we know their names in 2026 is because of a group of women who refused to be silenced, even when the entire world was screaming at them to stay quiet. They call themselves the Sisters of Survival, and their 20-year war against the global elite is the only reason the Epstein Files Transparency Act exists today. The 2026 files reveal that the first crack in the armor didn't come from the FBI or the police, it came from Maria Farmer. The unsealed 2026 logs contain a 1996 report she filed with the NYPD and the FBI, a full decade before Epstein's first arrest. The 2026 documents show that the FBI ignored her, even after she described the secret surveillance rooms and the abuse of her younger sister, Annie Farmer. Because the government failed to act on Maria's report in 1996, the 2026 files estimate that over 1,000 additional victims were trafficked in the years that followed. This is the legacy of silence that the 2026 data dump has finally laid bare. It wasn't a lack of evidence that protected Epstein, it was a lack of will from the people in power. The most heartbreaking chapter of the 2026 release involves Virginia Giuffre. For 15 years, she was the public face of the resistance, staring down the British monarchy and the American legal system. But the truth came at a devastating cost. On April 25, 2025, Virginia Jeffrey died by suicide at her home in Australia at the age of 41. The 2026 unsealed files include her final correspondence, where she expressed that the weight of the world's secrets had become too heavy to carry. Her death in 2025 was the catalyst that finally forced Congress to pass the Transparency Act. In October 2025, her posthumous memoir, Nobody's Girl, was released, providing the final, unedited details that the 2026 DOJ files have now confirmed as fact. While Virginia did not live to see the 2026 data dump, her work led to the one person who is still facing the consequences, Ghislaine Maxwell. As of February 2026, Maxwell remains incarcerated at FPC Bryan, serving her 20-year sentence. The 2026 files include new 2025 testimony from Maxwell, where she attempted to trade names for a commuted sentence, a request that the DOJ officially denied on January 16, 2026. The 2026 documents also highlight the courage of Johanna Soberg, Courtney Wild, and Haley Robson, whose names appear in the unredacted 2026 transcripts. These women didn't just survive, they litigated. They fought through the sweetheart deal of 2008 and the mysterious suicide of 2019 to ensure that the 3.5 million pages released this year would never be burned or buried again. As we close the 2026 Epstein Library, the lesson is clear. The system didn't catch Jeffrey Epstein, the victims did. They outlasted the lawyers, they outlived the benefactor, and they eventually broke the encryption on the most dangerous files in history. The names we have revealed in this video, Mandelson, Tisch, Lutnick, and the rest, are now part of the public record because the Sisters of Survival valued the truth more than their own safety. The files are open, the silence is over, and for the first time in 30 years, the survivors are the ones holding the power.